1933. My brother Everett wanted to be a singer. I told him he wasn't good enough. I was right, but I destroyed him. Bing Crosby wasn't talking to cameras. He was talking to Dean Martin, who just watched his 12-year-old son get brutally rejected. Dean grabbed his coat and headed for the door without a word, but Bing's confession stopped him cold. I lost my brother because I told him the truth the wrong way. Don't lose your son, Dean. What Bing did next became a secret Dean kept for 20 years, until his son's funeral. It was October 1963 at Warner Bros. Studios in Burbank, California. Dean Paul Martin, everyone called him Dino, was 12 years old and terrified. He'd grown up watching his father, Dean Martin, become one of the biggest stars in the world. The Rat Pack, the sold-out Vegas shows, the movies, the television specials. Dean Martin was America's cool uncle, the guy who made everything look effortless. But Dino knew something the world didn't. His father was scared for him. "You don't have to do this," Dean had told him that morning in the car. "You don't have to be a singer just because I am." But Dino did want it, or at least he thought he did. He loved music. He loved watching his father perform. And when people asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, singer was the only answer that made sense. The problem was Dino didn't know if he was good enough, or if people only paid attention to him because of his last name. That's why Dean had called Bing Crosby. Bing and Dean had worked together on Road to Hong Kong the year before, and despite their 18-year age gap, they'd formed an unlikely friendship. Bing was the old guard, the crooner who defined American music in the 1930s and 40s. Dean was the new school, the swinging, seemingly careless Italian kid who made it all look like a joke. But both men shared something. They were fathers. Bing had 4 sons, all of whom had tried to follow in his footsteps, and Dean was desperate to protect Dino from the mistakes he'd seen other Hollywood kids make. "Bing," Dean had said over the phone 3 days earlier, "I need a favor. Can you listen to my boy? But don't tell him you know me. I need the truth." Bing had agreed immediately. "Bring him to Studio 3 on Friday. Private session, just us." Now Dino stood in the recording booth, staring at the microphone that looked twice as big as it should. Through the glass, he could see his father sitting in the control room next to Bing Crosby. Dean was smoking a cigarette, trying to look casual, but Dino could see his father's jaw was tight. Bing's voice came through the intercom, warm and professional. "All right, son, whenever you're ready. What are you going to sing for us?" "The Way You Look Tonight," Dino said, his voice cracking slightly. "Good choice. That's a beautiful song. Let's hear it." The piano track started. Dino took a breath and began to sing. Technically, he was fine. He hit the notes. He had decent pitch control for a 12-year-old. His phrasing wasn't bad, but as Bing sat there listening, his expression remained neutral, almost unreadable. Dean watched his son through the glass, pride and fear mixing in equal measure. This was the moment. This was where they'd find out if Dino had what it took, or if Dean would have to figure out how to gently steer his son towards something else. When Dino finished the last note, the studio went silent. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Dino shifted nervously at the microphone, looking through the glass at the 2 men who weren't saying anything. Finally, Bing leaned forward and pressed the talkback button. "That was technically correct," Bing said slowly. "Good pitch, good tone. You've clearly been practicing." Dino smiled, starting to feel hopeful. Then Bing continued, "But here's what I heard, son. I heard someone singing because they think they're supposed to. I heard someone going through the motions. What I didn't hear," Bing tapped his chest, "was anything here. You're singing because your father is famous. You're singing because you think that's what you should do. But you're not singing because you want to, and that's a problem." The smile disappeared from Dino's face. His eyes began to fill with tears. In the control room, Dean's jaw clenched. He put out his cigarette in the ashtray, grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, and stood up without saying a word. Bing noticed. "Dean!" Dean didn't respond. He just walked toward the door. "Dean, wait!" Dean's hand was on the doorknob. He stopped, but didn't turn around. Bing stood up from the console. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "Dean, sit down. You're one of the best fathers I've ever seen, and that's exactly why you need to hear this." Dean stood there for a long moment. His shoulders were tense. Finally, without turning around, he spoke. "What do you want me to hear, Bing?" "Sit down, please." Dean turned slowly and looked at Bing. The older man's face wasn't harsh. It was sad, almost haunted. Dean walked back and sat down. He didn't look at his son in the booth. He looked at Bing. 1933, Bing began, his voice quiet. "I was already famous. Not like I am now, but I'd made it. I was on a radio, I was making records, and my younger brother, Everett, wanted to be a singer too." Dean lit another cigarette, listening. "Everett looked up to me, worshipped me, really, and he asked if he could sing with me, if I'd help him get into the business. So I listened to him. And Dean, the truth was, he wasn't very good. He had a nice enough voice, but he didn't have it. You know what I mean, that thing that makes people stop and listen." Bing paused, his voice tightening slightly. "So I told him. I said, 'Everett, you're not good enough. You should find something else to do.' I thought I was helping him, saving him from embarrassment, from failure." "What happened?" Dean asked quietly. "He believed me," Bing said. "That's what happened. He quit music completely, went to work in a factory in Spokane, and I didn't see him for 8 years. When I finally tracked him down in 1941, you know what he told me? He said, 'Bing, I didn't quit because you said I wasn't good enough. I quit because you said it. And if you didn't believe in me, why should I?'" The studio was completely silent now. Even through the glass, Dino had stopped crying and was listening. "I lost my brother for 8 years because I told him the truth the wrong way," Bing continued. "And I'll tell you something else, Dean. I have 4 sons, 4 boys who all tried to follow in my footsteps, and I made the same mistake with 2 of them, Gary and Dennis. I was so focused on making sure they were good enough that I forgot to ask if they were happy." Bing looked directly at Dean now. "Gary's drinking himself to death right now. Dennis isn't far behind. And you want to know why? Because I broke them before they had a chance to find their own path." Dean's expression shifted. The anger was gone, replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe, or fear. Bing turned to look at Dino through the glass. The boy was sitting on the floor of the recording booth now, his arms wrapped around his knees. "Your son has talent, Dean. Real talent. But right now, he's singing for the wrong reasons. He's singing because he thinks it'll make you proud, because he thinks that's what a Martin is supposed to do. And if we let him keep going like this, he'll end up like Gary and Dennis, trying to be someone he's not until it destroys him." Bing stood up and walked to the window, placing his hand on the glass. "But if you give me 6 months, if you let me work with him every Sunday when the studios are closed, I'll teach him something more important than singing. I'll teach him how to find his own voice. Not your voice, not my voice, his voice." Dean was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. "Why Sundays?" "Because that's when nobody's watching. No photographers, no gossip columnists, no pressure. Just him and me and the music." Dean looked at his son through the glass. Dino was looking back at him now, his young face full of confusion and hurt. "And you won't tell him it's my idea?" Dean asked. "I won't tell him anything except how to be himself." Dean stood up and extended his hand. Bing shook it. As Dean headed toward the door again, this time to collect his son, he stopped and looked back at Bing. "Bing, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if the kid wants to do it." Dino said yes, and for the next 6 months, every Sunday morning at 8 a.m., a 12-year-old boy showed up at Warner Bros. Studio 3 to work with Bing Crosby. Nobody knew about it. Dean would drop Dino off at the studio gate and drive away. Bing would be waiting inside with coffee for him and hot chocolate for Dino. But they didn't start with singing. First, Bing said on that first Sunday, "Tell me what you're afraid of." It took 2 months before Dino could answer honestly. "I'm afraid that without my dad's name, I'm nobody." "Good," Bing said. "Now we can start." Bing taught Dino something that nobody else had: how to fail. They'd spend hours singing the same song wrong on purpose, off-key, with bad phrasing, with no emotion, until Dino understood that mistakes weren't the end of the world. The difference between a good singer and a great one, Bing would say, isn't that the great one never makes mistakes, it's that the great one isn't afraid of them. By month 3, Dino stopped asking, "Is this what my dad would do?" and started asking, "What do I want to do?" By month 6, Bing had him record a demo, not of a standard, but of a song Dino had co-written with 2 friends from school, Desi Jr. and Billy Hinsche. "This is you," Bing said when they finished. "This is your voice." In 1964, Dean Paul Martin, Desi Jr., and Billy Hinsche formed a band called Dino, Desi, and Billy. Their first single, "I'm a Fool," hit the Billboard Top 20. But here's what nobody knew. Bing Crosby had anonymously sent their demo to Capitol Records with a note that said, "Listen to this. Don't ask who they are, just listen." The record exec who received it later said, "I had no idea it was Dean Martin's kid until after we'd already signed them, and by then it didn't matter, because the music was good enough on its own." Over the next 5 years, Dino, Desi, and Billy released 4 albums and toured internationally. Dean Paul had found his own path, not as Dean Martin's son, but as himself. But the story doesn't end there. In 1968, Dean Paul joined the California Air National Guard and became a pilot, another passion Bing had encouraged him to explore during those Sunday sessions. Music is important, Bing had told him, but so is knowing who you are when the music stops. Dean Paul served in the Air Guard while continuing to make music. He became a respected pilot, eventually flying F-4 Phantom jets. On March 21, 1987, Captain Dean Paul Martin was killed when his F-4 crashed during a military training mission in California. He was 35 years old. Dean Martin, who'd always been known as Hollywood's unshakable cool guy, completely fell apart. He couldn't finish his concerts. He couldn't film his TV show. Friends said they'd never seen him cry until his son died. At the funeral, Dean was asked to say a few words. He stood at the podium, staring at the crowd, unable to speak. Finally, in a broken voice, he said this: "20 years ago, Bing Crosby told me something I never forgot. He said, I lost my brother because I told him the truth the wrong way. Don't lose your son. And because of Bing, I didn't lose Dino. Not really. I got to know him. I got to watch him become himself." Dean paused, tears streaming down his face. "My son died doing what he loved, flying. But before that, he lived doing what he loved, being exactly who he was supposed to be. And I owe that to Bing. I owe that to those 6 months of Sundays that nobody knew about." In 1995, long after both Dean and Bing had passed away, a box of letters was found in Bing Crosby's estate. Among them were 47 handwritten notes from Dean Paul Martin, one for each Sunday they'd worked together. The last one, dated April 1964, read, "Mr. Crosby, I don't know if I'll be a famous singer, but I know I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you for teaching me that being good enough means being myself. Dino." The story of Bing Crosby and Dean Paul Martin reminds us that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone isn't praise, it's truth delivered with love. Bing could have let that 12-year-old boy walk out of the studio believing he was ready when he wasn't. He could have spared his feelings, but instead he chose the harder path. He told the truth, and then he offered a solution. He didn't just break the kid down, he built him back up, not as a copy of his father, not as a tribute to Bing's legacy, but as himself. And in doing so, Bing honored the memory of his brother Everett, made amends for the mistakes he'd made with his own sons, and gave Dean Martin the greatest gift one father can give another, the chance to truly know his child. Today, Dean Paul Martin is remembered not as Dean Martin's son who tried to sing, but as a talented musician, a brave pilot, and a man who lived authentically. All because Bing Crosby told him the truth, and then showed him how to use it. If this story of brutal honesty and transformative mentorship moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the truth, delivered with love, can change everything. Have you ever had someone tell you a hard truth that ended up saving you? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to hit that notification bell for more incredible untold stories from Hollywood's golden age.